Hi, welcome back to SQL Server 2016 Administration. This is the section on extended events, and in this video we'll talk about extended event targets. In this video we're going to learn how targets are used with extended events to capture data. We'll discuss the different types and the uses of these targets, and then we'll look at how we can configure and set these targets up. In an extended event subsystem, a target is the place where the extended event data actually gets sent. Now these are typically data storage locations, though they're not necessarily permanent storage locations, as we'll see. Each of these targets is set up with a session, and a session can have multiple targets. So unlike trace, an extended event session can ensure that data goes to multiple places. Each session will send data to what instance of the target. When the session starts, it creates an instance. So for example, it might have a different file each time, it might have a new space in memory, etc. Now, one of the advantages of extended events is that it is lighter weight, and make this system work, extended events will actually put information in a memory buffer, and then it periodically will flush that buffer out to the target. So most of the targets take this information asynchronously. Some of the systems work synchronously, but they're in memory. So we'll see how each of these work. Now let's look at the first target, the event file target. This is actually a physical file in the file system where all the data is sent. Now the default location for these files is the SQL Server log folder, though you can change that. Each of these files is a binary format that's readable by extended events. So it's not something that's human readable. It can be queried. We'll see in a later video how we can actually access this information. When we pick the file name, we can specify what it is, but SQL Server will add a suffix to the end, and it has to have an XEL extension. You can't choose something else. There are various parameters we can set, such as the maximum file size and how many files might be in a rollover, and we'll look at those in the demo. The ring buffer target is a memory-based target, which means that all the data exists in memory, and if the session is stopped, the data is actually discarded. So you can only query this while the session is running. Unlike some of the other formats, or certainly like the file format for file target, this content is actually a string of XML, so you can query it and read it. However, the ring buffer target isn't necessarily recommended. It can miss some events, it can use too much memory. There are certainly some problems. I've linked a blog from Jonathan Cahias where he talks about some of the issues with the ring buffer target. The event counter target is a very simple target that exists in memory just like the ring buffer, and all it does is count the number of times each event occurs. There are no parameters for this target, and it just processes data synchronously because it's just counting events. It's very lightweight and it can be useful if you're just trying to get an idea of how often something occurs. The histogram target is very similar to the event counter. This counts events as well, but it counts events for fields or actions depending on the parameters. So it gives you a little more distribution of what's happening with your targets. And we'll look at some of the parameters that are available with the histogram target. The pair matching target is a great target for use with trying to correlate events together. So it detects start events that might not have an end or ones that do have an end. Parameters that you choose for this session will tell, or for this target, will tell you how to match the events up. There's a begin event and end event parameter. There's also a begin matching columns and end matching column parameter. And you can set these to choose which events are being matched up. Last target we'll look at is the event tracing for Windows target. Now, event tracing for Windows is actually a system that allows system administrators in Windows to capture more metrics and instrumentation on what's happening on the system itself. And this target allows extended event data to be forwarded to event tracing for Windows so that it can be correlated and examined with other data. This does work synchronously, and so if you have administrators that use event tracing for Windows, this is actually a good target. If you wish to use this target, you can get some more information in the link provided. Now let's look at a demo, and we'll see how we can add targets to a session with T-SQL and Management Studio. Here I am in Management Studio, and I've got a packed session, and you'll see I've got a couple of targets actually listed in this session. Package 0 is just the set of events that occur right now in extended events. There's no other options right now. And I've got an event counter target and a ring buffer target. If I look at the definition of this particular session, what we'll see is that there's this data storage element, which is where my targets are stored. And you can see in this case, I've got this ring buffer target. Oh, the event counter, I think I removed that. So let's add it back. So if I go through the list, we'll see that first thing that comes up, alphabetical order, is the event tracing for Windows, and there's various items we can put there. Here's the event counter, which we add, and as we can see, there's no parameters down here. Let's add a different target as well. So if I go up here and look at this drop down, the histogram target is one of the options as well, and you can see that I can pick an event filter on. For example, maybe I care about logins, and then I can look at some action. So maybe I only care about logins to a particular database name. Or if I look at the fields, maybe I only care about if this is cached or something else. It's up to me to set these up, and then I can pick how many buckets in my histogram will exist. So obviously the more buckets I pick, the more memory that's in use, but it's up to me to choose those. The pair matching target is the next one. And here you can see that I can pick an event such as a log in, and I can end with a log out. And then I can kind of choose other items that I want to add in here. So there's fields and actions. I can pick these. I can pick a particular database name, or if it's cached or something else, if it's a dedicated administrator connection. And I can add these actions along with the event. So the event would be a login, and an action would be something else that occurs, or a field. So I can add these in, and this would allow me to specify how am I going to match up the pairs that exist here. And that's it for those targets. Let's go back and actually add a event file target. I think we might have skipped. So I have a file name here. I can pick a maximum file size, and you can see I can do this in megabytes, gigabytes. And then I can pick, let's do this 1 megabyte, if I'm going to allow rollover. So I could certainly not have rollover, or I could allow rollover. And once I put this in, then it'll change my session. I'll actually add these additional targets. Once that is complete, let's refresh this. This doesn't refresh default Management Studio. You can see I've got multiple targets here. And since this session is running and it's green, I can actually say I want to look at this target data, and I'll see data from the event file. I can look at the event counter. You can see what's been counted in here as well. I can look at the ring buffer as well. And in the ring buffer, you'll see I get XML information there that I can pop open. So each of these is set. My event file, if I go back in here and look at the session properties, I'll be able to see that that event file is actually stored in my system. So we can see here it says it's in packed, which means it's probably in my default system. So let's take a look at that. Here's my default log directory. For my instance, it's C, Program Files, Microsoft SQL Server, my named instance ID, MS SQL log. And you can see that my SQL Server error log is in here. And then there's various other events as well. So if I look at the types here, you'll see these are extended event log files. Here's my packed file. And you can see that SQL Server has added 0, which is the first file, and then a time date stamp item here that allows me to figure out what's going on. Here are my system health sessions and various other items. I can certainly change this, as I have in one of my other systems. I have this folder as well, my C database, and you can see here, this is a different session that's running here right now as well. And so I can set the name for this session, and SQL Server will add the extensions as well. And we can see this one back in Management Studio. Here we are back in Management Studio. There's that other session that I had in place, and that one is stopped, so that data is not there. If I now stop this session, and I want to go look at the ring buffer, what I'll find is that the session is not running. I can't view the target data. Same thing occurs if I want to look at the event counter. Now I still can look at the event file because that's a more permanent record. But that's something you should be aware of. If I stop the session, some of this data is not available. There's a lot more to learn about extended events than I've shown in this video. It's a complex system, and while it's incredibly useful, it does take some practice and some understanding to learn how to read the data, access it, set up your sessions to capture the information you want, limit the filters to just those particular events that you care about. So I'd advise you, as you continue on your journey learning how to administer SQL Server, you learn more about extended events. I've linked some resources here in the slide. There's a stairway on SQL Server Central that will give you some information on how to go through extended events. Jonathan Gasias blogs extensively and is one of the more well-known experts on extended events, and I've linked his blog. And then there are a number of tips from MS SQL Tips that you might check as well. In our next video, we'll take a look at extended event options.